My name is Morna Gerard, and I'm interviewing Kristina Graves for the Georgia State University's Women's March Oral History Project. The date is April 6th, 2017, and the interview is taking place in special collections at this Georgia State University Library. Okay, start with an easy question. What year were you born, and where were you born?
I was born in 1979, March 31st, so I just had a birthday. And I was born at Crawford Long Hospital, downtown Atlanta. But I grew up in Hampton, which is just south of Atlanta. So it's kind of a suburb of the Atlanta area.
When did you come back
to Atlanta? I came back during college because I never really liked it. It's my hometown. I mean, I loved my family, but I never really, it just always seemed too small to me. So I came back for college because I wanted to go to school in a big city, and Atlanta was pretty much the only option for my family financially. So I came to Georgia State and moved up to the city, and I've been here ever since. Now I live in Decatur, which is, you know, where it's greater. I live in Decatur because I love it. It's close enough to the city, but it's got that kind of indie, hippie, liberal feel to it.
When you were at Georgia State, what did you study?
I studied history, and I went to Georgia State for my undergrad and my master's, and actually worked with you on my master's project because I studied women's history. And now I'm back again at Georgia State working on my doctorate.
That's great. Yeah. And what do you plan to do when you're done with your doctorate?
Oh gosh, right now my goal is to work for the National Women's History Museum. That's like my dream job, and I'm actually a volunteer for them. I help design lesson plans for them and work with some of the people there, and I'm on their advisory council for doing public outreach. So I'm really hopeful that will turn into an opportunity once I get my degree. Got to write the dissertation first, though.
And what's your dissertation about?
Men's roles in the women's suffrage movement.
Cool.
So looking at male support of women's suffrage and why it was necessary and why it was important.
Where are you finding your resources?
I found a lot of stuff online, the Library of Congress and other digital collections, but this past summer I went on a road trip for about a month and just went all over like the Northeast area. So like I went to the Library of Congress, National Archives, Smithsonian, the New York Public Library, New York Historical Society, which is amazing, the Boston Public Library, and then Smith College, the Sophia Smith Collection. And then just all over, I'm getting resources sent to me from different places, like Rice University sent me some of their stuff. And so I'm just kind of amassing this huge collection of stuff about men, which is kind of weird because I'm a women's history person, but I write about men. So,
very cool. Can you talk to me about your family's political leanings? Is it okay to talk about that?
They'll probably disown me after this, but no, growing up, my parents, I was raised in a Southern Baptist church, and I didn't really realize conservative, liberal, it wasn't really a thing growing up. My parents told me, you treat everyone with respect. So even though my parents, I think, were very conservative, my mom had gay friends, my family, this was in the 70s and 80s. I mean, when Clayton County was integrating from majority white to Black people moving in, a lot of people moved out, and my parents stayed. And my parents were like, people are people, you don't treat them differently. So that being said, I think as we've gotten older, I've become, I think because I am more liberal than they anticipated, because I took their word seriously. You treat people as people, and everybody's the same, and you don't discriminate, and so because of that, I think I developed a very liberal consciousness, even though I didn't know that's what it was. But my parents voted for Trump, and that's caused some interesting issues over the past year and a half, and some interesting conversations. But my parents were always, it was just my mom and my dad and me. And my parents were political, but I didn't really have an understanding of party. But I remember my mom at 3 o'clock in the morning putting me in the back of her car to go put up signs for somebody, and in some cases running over signs of the opposition party. We should probably edit that out.
I'm sure many people have done that.
Oh yeah. It was yeah. So we would go to rallies and civic meetings for like school board and stuff like that. So I grew up understanding voting and political activism was very important. And my dad always used to tell me, it doesn't matter who you vote for, it matters that you vote. And then my parents raised me to have they wouldn't call it feminist consciousness, because they just would not use that word, but they raised me to have a very, it was a very feminist consciousness, even though I didn't know that word. And my mom was a very strong woman, and my dad loved my mom, and my dad always used to tell me, just because you're a girl doesn't mean you can't do things, and it doesn't mean you can't do anything that a boy can do. I used to ask him, do you regret not having a son? And he used to tell me, never. He said, because everything I would need a son for, I have you for. And he did. He taught me to play basketball. He taught me to play baseball. He taught me how to use tools and fix things. And I was daddy's girl and a tomboy. And my mom was a very opinionated woman and very strong-willed. So I think I get it, honestly. And so that's kind of my family background. The conservatism, I think maybe it was always there, maybe it wasn't, and or maybe they've become more conservative, or maybe I've just become so much more liberal, and so it's hard sometimes to kind of balance the parents that taught me to treat people equally with the same people who would then turn around and vote for that man, President Trump. So it's been a bit of a struggle on that end.
This is probably a really stupid question, but just for the record, are you a Republican or Democrat?
Until this year, I didn't really align with a party. I was a liberal independent. If I had found a Republican candidate that matched me on certain issues, I might have voted for him. There are a lot of Republicans that I think moderates that I would, support. Like John McCain, when Obama ran the first time, I liked Obama, but I had concerns about his inexperience, and I seriously considered voting for McCain until he moved further right. But until this election, I can't really say that I was a solid Democrat, and now I would say I'm a solid Democrat. I've always been registered Democrat because in Georgia we have the primary and we have to, but I had voted for Republicans. But I have to be a Democrat now. I have to.
Where did you see all of this happening? Where the Republicans were beginning to not look like the Republicans that you could support?
Well, as a student of history, I understand that it was well before I was born when this shift started, in the 60s and 70s. But in my lifetime, I think it really was when Obama got elected. I didn't vote for Bush. I didn't like his politics. I certainly didn't like his views on abortion, and advocated pretty strongly against going into Iraq. But at never at any point did I think that he was a bad man, or did I doubt his compassion for people, and never did I think that he wasn't capable of being a president. I never had those, I never woke up in the middle of the night worried that he was going to get us involved in a war with someone. So even though I disagreed with him, I especially after 9/11 happened, I supported him and supported going into Afghanistan. But then Iraq happened, and I just couldn't do that. But it was really when Obama got elected, I think, that the Republican Party just really shifted. And shifted in such a way that I just could not believe that this was the same party that had been the party of Lincoln, the party of abolition, the party of women's suffrage. Because the things that were coming out of some of their mouths were it didn't make sense to me. And I mean, I grew up in Georgia, and so racism is not something that I am, immune to, or what's the word I'm looking for, or ignorant of, but I even worked at the state legislature for 5 years after undergrad. So, I mean, I'm well aware of how politics work, but to me it just seemed like the Republican Party took on a new level of bigotry that I could not support under any circumstances.
Before all of this happened, have you been politically active?
I've always been politically outspoken, especially with friends and family, online, Facebook. I'm very outspoken online. I haven't really been active in the sense of like participating in demonstrations or marches or things like that. I mean, I've given money, and part of it is a time thing because I'm a teacher. So I consider my teaching a sort of activism, working with kids, teaching them about, racism and equality and gender and stuff. So I try to slide that into the curriculum. But I haven't been, I was politically active in college when I first kind of found my own voice, my own feminist voice. I was really politically active in college, but once college stopped, I kind of fell off the activism. I still paid attention, I still voted, I was still very outspoken about things, gave money, but I just didn't participate in like demonstrations or marches, or certainly not, I actually became kind of apolitical for a while because I was just so tired of the system.
Where do you teach?
Clayton County.
And what age group is it you're teaching?
Right now, high school. I used to teach middle school for, I think, 8 years. I taught 8th grade Georgia history. And then the past 3 years, I've taught world history to 9th graders.
Have you seen any things that you are concerned about, or anything that sort of like surprised you in the classroom since the election, or throughout the election?
I remember because nobody thought he was going to win. I mean, he was kind of a joke. And, I mean, I couldn't even believe he had made it as far as he had and that he had as much support as he did. And then with the whole thing with, you know, can I say? Oh, yeah, okay. With the whole thing with Pussygate and, you know, him talking about grabbing women and by their private parts, I thought, this is done. He's done, because there's no way this is going to fly with conservative Christians. And then when he got elected, it's like the next day at school, everybody was walking around in shock. It's kind of like when you see an accident on the side of the road, you know you shouldn't be looking at it, but you just can't stop looking at it. And I had kids who were literally devastated. I had Muslim kids in my class who were sobbing, and I had Latino kids in my class who have people who are illegal in their family. Some of my students themselves who are illegal, which, you know, I'm aware of, but pretend ignorance, because that's what you do when you're a teacher. And they were devastated. They were so scared. I had one little girl who didn't know if her entire family was going to be deported, and she sat in my room just sobbing. I mean, like, I had to take 2 whole days off of my lessons to just let my students vent. And the worst part for me as a teacher is not having the answer. I didn't know what to tell them, because I was scared, but, you know, I wasn't, like, my family's not illegal, and I'm not Muslim, you know, but, you know, I have friends who are gay. I have, you know, friends who are Muslim, and I didn't know what to tell to my students. I didn't know what to say. You know, I did tell my students in an effort to kind of, you know, because in teaching you learn that comedy is often the best medicine. So I did tell my students that, you know, if necessary, I would be, I would turn my house into an annex, and they could be Latino and Muslim and Franks. And of course, these are students that I know well, and so I wasn't saying that disparagingly or, you know, in a racist context. I have that rapport with my students, and so of course, this one little girl who was sobbing, she was just like, "Oh, Miss Graves, you're so wonderful." And I was like, "Well, you know, this is what we do. You know, we do for people." And I was like, you know, I don't have much, but I have an attic and I have an arrow bed, and if I have to, I'll smuggle all of you in my house. You know, it was said kind of in jest, you know, but it felt real to me, and it felt real, I think, it felt real to my students, you know, knowing that we were all kind of in this together. I think my students are still scared. And I've seen them become more aware of things. They've started watching the news more, and they've started listening more and started paying attention more. And we talk about political activism, and, you know, I think a lot of that is part of the reaction to the election. Yeah.
In some ways, it's the worst. Sometimes there are small silver linings that come out of devastating events.
Yeah.
And I think a youth that is now
woke,
really,
as they say,
really, and a youth is not just like people in their 20s. It's actually much younger people. They may be a much more political generation or active generation.
Yeah, my kids were so frustrated with their parents because their parents wouldn't go out and vote. And my kids were like, how can you not go out and vote? And, my students would come to me and complaining about their parents and complaining that, my mom, she said she's not going to vote because it doesn't matter who she votes for and blah, 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 blah. And, she said, and I just don't understand this. There's a clear winner here. I don't understand this. And God, I wish I could vote. God, I wish I was 18. And so my students had that I think if this election has done anything positive, and I'm trying to be optimistic here, it's that it will cause people to pay attention.
Oh yeah.
And I'm very hopeful of that. I'm very hopeful of that.
And they're going to be voting age before we know it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So have you participated in a march before? So this was your first march?
It was my first march.
What was it that just made you decide, I'm going to go do this?
It was, I think it was the day after the election. It literally, I was feeling so angry and so appalled that this man was going to represent my country. I told someone I've never been ashamed of being an American before. I know my country's not perfect. I know it has its problems, but I've never been ashamed of my country before. I was embarrassed. I felt like, and I wanted to do something. And the election itself didn't wake me up. It was the campaign that kind of brought me back into politics. So for the whole of 2016, I was like politically just on fire. Just every issue, every time he opened his mouth or somebody around him, I was just on it like that, and wanting to I just wanted to do something. And then when I saw that they were planning a women's march in DC, and I think at this point it was like there were like 30,000 people, and so I was like, okay, I'm interested. And then like the next week, I got to thinking about it, and I was just like, oh my God, yeah, I love DC. It's my city. And I think within that week, I paid to go on one of the buses.
Which bus did you
the Decatur bus.
Okay.
I took one of the Decatur buses. At this point, there were only Atlanta buses, so I signed up for one of them, but then later I switched to a Decatur bus. And I remember calling my best friend at the time and telling him, I'm going to this march in January and you're going with me. I didn't even ask. I just said, you're going with me. And he said, okay, where are we going and what are we marching for? And I said, we're going to DC and we're going to march for women's rights. And he kind of paused and he said, are there going to be a lot of lesbians there? Because he's a gay man. So for him, like, you know, he's like, am I going to be the only man? Am I going to be, you know, or am I going to be hated and burned in effigy? Are they going to come after me? And I said, well, you know, if they do, we can make you a sign that says, don't hate me, I'm gay. And he said, definitely. So I signed up, And then I started trying to get my friends to sign up, and everybody was talking about it online. And it's like the further along we got, and the closer we got to it, the more energy was in it. And there were all these articles about how it was going to be, you know, it was either going to be a huge disappointment, or it was going to be, you know, the biggest march ever. And then all these international marches kept getting planned, and then there were the marches within the states, and it was just, it just became very apparent to me that this was something I had to do. That as a women's historian, as a feminist, I had to participate in this march. That if I didn't go to the one in DC, I would always regret it. You know, which is not to say that the marches in Atlanta and the other cities were not equally viable. It's just, for me personally, I knew that if I was not at the DC march, that I would always regret it. So I made plans to go. I didn't tell my parents until like 2 days before that I was going.
What did they say when you told them? Or you don't have to tell.
Oh, no. I was actually, I mean, even though I'm in my 30s, I don't talk politics with my parents. I learned during last election, because my mom especially is she's very opinionated and vocal, but she's on one end of the spectrum and I'm on the other, and so usually when we talk about stuff, it's like Clash of the Titans. So she thinks I'm wrong, I think she's wrong, and so it just becomes this big, huge mess. And she's an avid Trump supporter. Like, she didn't just vote for him, she loves him. And I would get so frustrated by that, because, you know, it's like, you taught me how to be a feminist. You taught me to be strong. You taught me how to be an independent woman. You taught me to, you know, that women should be respected. How can you vote for this man? And she said, well, I just don't like Hillary. And I was like, oh my God, really? And she said, I don't think she's trustworthy. And I'm like, but Trump is. So I was a little I say all that because I was a little concerned about telling them, which is why it wasn't going to stop me from going. I mean, you know, I'm an independent woman, but I was a little concerned about how they were going to react to it, and I just didn't want to hear my mom actually found out about it on accident, because I had posted something on Facebook, not realizing that she could see it. And she sent me a text message that says, what's this about a women's march? And I was like, oh. And so I told her, I said, I was going to tell you. I wasn't going to go without telling you. I was just trying to think of the best way to tell you. And she said, well, I figured you would go. I don't know why you didn't tell me before. She said, in fact, I told your father, I wonder if Christy's going to go to this thing. And I was like, well, yes, I am going. And she said, by yourself? And I was like, no, my friend is going with me. And she was like, oh, good. I feel so much better that he's going with you. And I was like, oh my God. Really? How sexist is that? You feel better about me going to a women's march because I'm taking a man with me. Mom, really? But you know, so they handled it okay. But then every day after that, you know, my mom would call me and say, they're talking about riots, they're talking about bombings, they're talking about, you know, anti-protests, you know, are you sure? Don't you get involved in that? Don't you get locked up? She was so worried I was going to go to jail. She said, don't get locked up. Don't do this. I was like, Mom, this is a peaceful demonstration. She said, well, it may be, you may be peaceful, but there may be other people there who won't be peaceful, so just be careful. And we actually got into kind of a big fight right before I went. But so the rest of that weekend, I talked to my dad, and I was like, I'm here, I'm safe, I'm fine. And I would send him pictures, and he was like, okay, as long as you're safe, I'm good. Because my mom's like me. We're both very hot-tempered, so I think more so with each other than with other people, because it's the mother-daughter thing. She would say to me sometimes, I don't know how you got to be so liberal. For someone so smart, how could you be so liberal? And I said, because you taught me to think for myself, and you taught me to be independent, and you taught me to question things. So if I'm liberal, technically it's your fault. And she doesn't like it when I say that. But my mom did tell me one time, she said, even though I disagree with your politics, she said, and I don't understand why you think the way you do, she said, I am very proud that you stand up for what you believe in, and that you are willing to be vocal, and that you are willing to be passionate about your issues. So that, I think that helped. So I'm rambling like
Not
crazy.
at all. I think this is great.
They're going to have a lot of stuff to write about
yeah.
in the future. So, hi.
Well, we are in the South, and I think that your experience is not unique. I mean, you've come from progressive kids coming from conservative families.
Absolutely. I think it's generational too.
Yeah.
I think my parents kept expecting, because my dad always told me, you'll get more conservative as you get older, and I've gotten more liberal as I've gotten older. I mean, I'm practically a socialist, and I was going to vote for Bernie, and my parents were like, oh my God, you're going to vote for that communist. And I was like, he's not a communist. He's a democratic socialist. There's a difference. Have you heard of Sweden? Have you heard of Denmark? Have you heard of Finland and Canada? That's the same thing. And my parents are Cold War babies, and they just can't wrap their heads around anything that's not American capitalism.
But fascism is fine.
Apparently, if it looks like American capitalism, it's fine. Yeah, fascism is okay as long as it's dressed in a suit and is a businessman.
If you had to choose one issue that really motivates you, that you were going toward the march, like as a, in your heart, is there one issue that you care more about than any other around all of this?
Well, I don't know, I'm pretty passionate about all of them. I will say, and I don't quite understand why, but abortion has always been an issue for me. I've never had an abortion. I don't even know if I agree with it, because as a spiritual person, I recognize that life is sacred, which is why I have such an issue with people who are supposedly pro-life. But to me, I have a fundamental issue with a government that thinks it is okay to tell a woman that she has to be a mother, and that just because she can get pregnant, she should be a mother. I have a fundamental issue with a government saying that, well, you made that mistake, so now you have to suffer the consequences. Like a baby is a mistake, and then I have a major problem with assuming that women are children women who have abortions haven't thought it through. Like, you're treating me like I'm a child, like I haven't thought through the process, like I haven't made up my mind. And then there's a spiritual dimension of it for me too, is I firmly believe that that God is about compassion and love. And I firmly believe in a God that accepts people for where they are and the decisions that they make, and understands all the things that go into those decisions. So for me, you can't just say that abortion is wrong and should be illegal without also talking about the economic inequalities of the system that make it difficult for women to raise their children. You can't talk about abortion without talking about equal pay, without talking about healthcare, without talking about racism, because a lot of women who have abortions are women of color, and are already mothers. You know, you can't talk about abortion without talking about the fact that there's still a double standard for women's sexuality, that, you know, if a man goes out and sleeps with, you know, if a man goes out and sleeps with 30 women, he's a man. But if a woman goes out and sleeps with 5 men, she's a slut and a whore. So you can't isolate abortion, because until you talk about all these other issues and what feeds into abortion, you can't really address it. And I have a fundamental issue with conservatives who say that they are pro-life, but you want to eradicate and eliminate birth control, which would make it possible to eliminate abortion almost altogether. You're pro-life, but you don't. If the baby is black, then you are going to label it as a thug, and it's okay for you to put it in a foster care system that you care nothing about. If the baby is gay, you're okay with conversion therapy. So that's my issue. I understand the life argument, but for me, abortion becomes symbolic because it's really at the heart of all the other issues that this country does not want to talk about. And I think what's even more important about it is the fact that it's an issue that really is about the woman, and whether, am I a woman, an autonomous being, or am I just a carrier, a womb? And I think that is why it's always been such a huge issue for me, is because it's not just about whether or not a woman should be able to determine if she's pregnant. For me, it's about all these other things that need to be fixed in our society. You know, Alice Paul is a suffragist. She was not for abortion because she felt that it undermined women. And I can see her point, because I feel like it's a last resort. I think any woman who has one, whether she regrets it or not, it's a last resort. And why are we not talking about things that would, comprehensive sex education, free access to birth control that's covered by health insurance? Why are we not talking about these things? If you're so opposed to abortion, why are you against the very things that would eliminate abortion? That's why I know that people who talk about abortion, for them, it's not really about abortion. It's about women's sexuality, because you're opposed to the very things that would eliminate it. And so for me, abortion becomes kind of the centerpiece issue. I don't know why it's so important to me. You know, people have asked me that question before, but it's not because I've had one. It's not because, you know, I even necessarily agree with it. I just think that it's such an important issue, and nothing pisses me off more, than a man who will never have to even contemplate that choice. Will never even have to think about, well, what if? I mean, he'll never be the one that sits on the toilet staring at the pregnancy stick wondering, well, if this turns pink, what am I going to do? He'll never have to do that. And so I really resent a bunch of men trying to make that choice when they know nothing about it. And so it's always been kind of a lightning rod issue for me.
Yeah, what did you think about that I don't know, remember the name of the politician very recently who said that he'd never been affected by birth control?
I thought, you're an idiot. You are an absolute idiot. And then that's part of, like, your earlier question about the Republican Party. Like, are you serious? Are we still in the 1950s? I mean, do you legitimately believe that your life has never been influenced by birth control? Or even Tom Price, who's the new Secretary of Health and Human Services, I think. And he when he was being confirmed, made the statement that, that women could afford birth control without insurance. And I called his office. I called his office the day he made that statement, and I told his staff exactly how much my birth control cost over time, and how much it cost me to have it put in, because I have an IUD. I can't use the pill for a lot of reasons. And so, and I also told him that. I was like, it's not just about the pill. Women go on birth control for all kinds of reasons. Like for me, I mean, not to get too personal, but, minor health reasons. And so because of that, I called his office and I was just like, this is an asinine statement. It's ridiculous. You absolutely know nothing about reasons that women go on birth control, nor women who can afford it. Why are you making these statements? And I never got a call back, which I wasn't shocked. But it goes back to that whole, of course you're going to think that because you've never questioned it. It's that white male privilege that you've never experienced. You've never had to make that choice.
Different body parts.
Absolutely.
I want to, let's start talking about your journey to the march.
Okay.
What day did you leave? Was it like the night before?
It was election night, 9:00. I got on the bus, 9 p.m.
You mean inauguration night?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Inauguration night.
I'm going right now.
Yes. It was such a nightmare experience. I'm going to camp out on your doorstep. It was inauguration, and I did not watch the inauguration at all, because I couldn't watch. I couldn't watch it. My kids didn't want to watch it either, and but that night, my friend and I, we got on a bus with like 30 other women, and it was 30 other women, of course. He turned to me, he said, "See what I tell you?" And I said, "It'll be fine, just sit by the window and don't say anything." So, but there were other men on the bus, husbands and brothers and friends. But it was a lot of women, yeah. And
where did they pick you up?
We met at, what's this pottery gallery in Decatur. It was where it's over, actually closer to Avondale. Okay. There were several bus locations that you could catch, and that's the one that I had signed up for. And so we took an Uber, and got dropped off, and we were on the bus, and we were late pulling off because the bus drivers apparently had not packed something that they needed and had to stop at several locations. So we were actually an hour late getting out of Atlanta. So there was some real concern that we weren't even going to make it in time, and we almost didn't. We rode straight through the night, and I'm knitting my hat on the bus by flashlight, and my friend, he's holding the flashlight and I'm knitting the hat. And at one point he's just like, "I think you need to give up on the hat. You're not going to get it done." And I said, "Yes, I am. I'm going to wear this hat. I'm going to wear this hat, and it's going to be great." And then I get the hat done, and it looks awful. It makes me look like a pink Yoda with, the ears sticking way up. And so these nice ladies on the bus next to me who are knitting a whole bunch of hats while I'm working on my one, said, well, give me the hat and I'll see if I can fix it. And they do something to the inside, like tie some sections together or something that fix it. And I actually looked like a cat instead of Yoda. So I was like, okay, all right, so I can wear this without being embarrassed. And then I put my little buttons on it, and I have a picture of me on the bus wearing the hat after they fixed it, and I'm feeling very happy about that. So so we get to the march, and we're on the interstate, and traffic is horrible. We're sitting on the interstate, and we're going right past the march. And the goal was the buses would drop us off at the stadium, and then we go to the march site. Well, the march had already, like the speakers had already started. And so the bus driver pulls over to the side, and our bus and 3 or 4 other buses behind us, who were also coming from various locations, pulled over to the side, and we get off the bus on the interstate and walk the interstate ramp to the march location. And there's like a sea of women in pink hats and men holding signs, and we're like taking over the interstate ramp, walking to the march location, and it's glorious, and I feel wonderful. And I see a woman who has a Votes for Women ribbon, and being a suffrage scholar, I love that. So I take my picture with her, and we have to, of course, climb over some barricades, which is an interesting experience, and in order to get off the ramp, because they have the interstate, the exits blocked, so that people can't get off of the exits. And so we literally have taken over the interstate. I don't remember which one it was. It might have been I-90 or something. Anyway, and then we start progressing up the ramp to the Smithsonian, to the National Mall. And all along there, people stopping at porta potties because we'd made a mad dash to get to DC that night, and there were no stops at all. And so everybody's rushing to handle their business. And so we get there, and I turn to Matt, that was my friend's name, and I say, if I've missed Gloria Steinem, I'm going to be pissed. And he says, who? And I'm like, oh my God, I brought the wrong person with me to the march. You don't know who Gloria Steinem is? And he says, no, I've never even heard of this woman. Who is she? And I said, you know what? I'll give you a history education on the back, going back to the bus. And so we're in the march, and it's cold, but it's not like, it's not like freezing cold, and and I have my hat and I have my sign, and we're progressing, and we get to the march, and we get to there's so many people there. There's so, like, it was so much bigger than anything I had even thought it would be. There was a sea of people. I mean, going forward, going backward, going off to the side. And it was when I stopped for a minute, and I just looked around, and then I looked at my friend, and I was like, oh my God, this is huge. And I said, this is how Alice felt. This is how Susan B. Anthony felt. This is how Betty Friedan felt. This is how, the women of the civil rights movement, Fannie Lou Hamer, this is how they felt, this moment, this rush. And also a little bit of fear, because you just never knew what was going to happen from any moment to the next, because there were so many people. And we get there, and we're standing kind of in front of one of the TV screens. We're pretty close to one, but then I realized it's not the main one. That one's actually further down. And so I told Matt, I said, well, we can just stay here. And he was like, that's fine with me. So we stand in that place for, a good while, because the speakers there were a lot of them. And I think that's the one negative I had to say about the march. It was that they planned way too many speakers. You need all those folks. You didn't need to bring out all of those people. But at the same time, it was a pretty amazing experience to just be in that crowd. And
did you manage to see Gloria Steinem?
I didn't hear her. I didn't hear her speech, but I did see her on the screen. And I was like, Gloria, hello. And I did get there in time to see. I did see Alicia Keys, who was amazing. I did see Scarlett Johansson, Van Jones, who I love Van. I love Van. He's an amazing activist. I saw the mothers of the movement, Trayvon Martin, and then I saw Janelle Monáe, and then I saw the individual women who organized the march, Linda and Bob Land, and all the ladies give their speeches. It was very empowering. It was very empowering.
And you could hear them?
I could hear them, yeah. We could hear them. We could see on the screen. So, and, there were some amazing speeches. Angela Davis, I got to hear her speech. I wish they had put her closer to the front instead of towards the end, because I feel like a lot of what she was saying got lost because the crowd had been there for so long. And she's just a phenomenal woman. Yeah. And Ashley Judd with her reenactment of that poem. Oh my God, it lit something in me that day. Like, it just, I think my friend, he had never seen me like that before, because I was just like fist in the air, yelling stuff, I lost my voice, because I was just so vocal, and with the chanting and the singing, and I think it caught him off guard a little, because, he wasn't used to, he knew I was political, but I don't think until that day he had really seen that side of me. And so honestly, until that day, I had never seen that side of me. I really didn't know that I was capable of, of all of that, but it was just, the energy was contagious, and it was so amazing. And the Indigo Girls, getting to hear them play Go, which is my song. I love that song, especially the first line, through the Dust Bowl, through the death, Grandma was a suffragette. That's become part of my anthem. And so it was, I keep saying the word amazing because there's just no other word to describe the energy. I mean, you were there, you felt it, but if you weren't there, it was just there were so many people, and the thing is like, one of the biggest criticisms of the march was that it was going to be a white women's march, but when you got there, there were so many different people, men, women, gay, straight, old, young, of different colors, families. I mean, there were kids there that their parents had brought, sons, boys and girls, with, little signs and little shirts that, my mom says I'm equal, and, I'm going to be president one day, and just, and the signage itself was just, oh my God, so amazing.
Well, let's talk about the signs.
Okay.
What was on your sign?
I had a blue sign that my students actually helped me decorate, because I don't do bubble letters very well. So I actually had one of my, because I'm in an art school, so I had one of my students, I gave her the quote that I wanted it to be, and she outlined the bubble letters and colored them in and actually made the sign for me. So I told her, make sure you put your name on this at the bottom, because, this is going to be important one day. And mine had a quote from Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, because this thing just kept running around in my head after the election. This was just a quote that just kept popping up in my head, and it's from a letter where Stanton and Anthony are writing about suffrage, and they're writing to these lawmakers. And in it, they say, we refuse to be silent while clowns make laws for queens. And I loved that line. And it just seemed so appropriate, not just for the march, but also the fact that here we are almost 200 years later with still the same issue, clowns trying to make laws for queens and women, and then it fit me because I love suffrage history, and it's kind of my thing. So I just thought that it was relevant, and I left my sign in DC, so it's floating around out there somewhere.
What sign did Matt take?
He didn't take one.
Okay. So he didn't take the.
He didn't take.
No,
he did not. He did have some buttons that I had given him, but he was kind of more of a observer, watcher, subtle. He was not political. Before this election, he had never voted. This man in his 30s, and he told me once, knowing you, he said, you've gotten me to do all kinds of things. Vote, go to a march, protest. And so, so he didn't have all the bling and the signage and stuff.
Talk about the signs that you
did see. They were amazing. They were so amazing. I think my favorite, and I can't remember them all, but the ones that I do remember, my absolute favorite was the one of Princess Leia that said, "Women belong in the resistance." And there were two different versions. One, because Carrie Fisher had just died, and I think for a lot of women my generation, Princess Leia, that character, was so important to us because she was beautiful, yes, but she was also smart. She was strong. She was a warrior. She wasn't like all the other, women that we saw growing up. She was just this amazing icon. And I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so at least the original 3, not some of the newer ones. So just seeing that sign, and knowing that Carrie Fisher herself was a feminist, I think 2016 had a lot of deaths of like people in my generation, but so like Prince, David Bowie, a lot of people, but Carrie Fisher's, I think, was the one that was the hardest because it was right there at the end. It was right after the election, and I was like, God, what more are you going to take from me? 2016, you've taken my soundtrack, you've taken my country, and now you're going to take my movies too. What are you doing? So I think for a lot of women, and I know definitely for me, the Princess Leia one, it spoke volumes about just where we were in that moment. I think there was another one that said, we are the women, we are the daughters of the witches you tried to burn. And I loved that poster because I was like, yes, because it just spoke to the generational nature of what was going on. And then there was another one that I saw at I saw a lot of versions of this poster. It was one I can't believe I'm still having to fight this shit. And I was like, yes, yes. So there were a bunch of them. And then the Women's March people had printed posters. And so I saw a lot of those. There were a bunch of posters of women in hijabs and stuff about Muslim women not being the enemy. Stuff about, there were a lot of anti-Trump posters, and there were so many, and there were a lot of posters throwing the word pussy around. It was like women were really reclaiming that word, taking it back from him. And so, you have women in their hats and with the posters, stuff like "my pussy is not up for grabs." It was cathartic in a way. Women were angry. Women were really, I think a lot of people were really angry.
You talked about the pussy hats. How did, looking around you, seeing all of these pussy hats, what did that do for you?
I know there was a lot of mixed emotions about it. The beautiful thing and the horrible thing about feminism is that because it allows for women to speak their minds, you're always going to have women to disagree. And that's a beautiful thing. But it can also be a negative in the sense of at some point we have to recognize that we're all in this boat together. And so for me, the hats stood as a symbol of unity. I didn't see it as a negative. The color pink, while it's not my favorite, doesn't offend me on some feminist level. And I think that it just depends on how you interpret things. The fact that, women are wearing pink hats doesn't offend me. The fact that the President of the United States can openly brag about sexually assaulting a woman, that offends me. So for me, a pink hat is not really, in the grand scheme of things, really gonna hurt me that much. I liked them, and the thing that I liked about it the most was that they were all unique, that women made them, that not only was it an effort to kind of reclaim his words and take back what he said, but it was also an effort to, I think, show the world that we're not afraid of that word, and we're not afraid of the body part. We're not afraid of what it represents, that we are not the generation to be ashamed of ourselves sexually, biologically. We're not that generation. And I think it also, the fact that women made these hats, that it wasn't something that you just went out and bought. Some women went out and bought hats, and that's fine. Especially, I would rather you wear a store-bought hat than not, than not be in solidarity. That's fine. But the fact that so many women took time, some women who hadn't knit in years, myself included, or some women who never knit. Like, I know a friend of mine, she had never knit before, and she taught herself how to knit just so she could make this hat. And there were a number of women like that. That's why I think they made the pattern so easy, so that they could, say, I made this hat, and the act of creation of making this hat is itself a political statement. I definitely think. One other thing that I wanted to say about my sign was that on the back of my sign, I wrote, I am also here for, and put the names of people that I was here for on the back of my signs. So like my students, this, that, and the other. And then I had taken a picture for the Women's March, their Facebook campaign. They wanted pictures of why women were marching. So I had taken a picture and posted it on Instagram of me holding a sign of why I marched. And I put, like for my students, for my friends, for my family, and all kinds of things. And I just think these little things that we do as activists, I think sometimes people, and myself included, think you have to do big things to be an activist, but I think sometimes it's the smaller ones. Do you know Anita Franco? Mm. She's a singer, a folk singer, and she has this song, oh God, I can't remember the title, but in it, there's a line that says, "In every time I move, I make a woman's movement." And I love that line because to me, it symbolized a lot of what this march was about. Just thousands of women coming together to make these little individual movements that would have this ripple effect.
Another thing that a lot of people responded to in the large group were the chants that were going. Were there some that struck you as just being awesome?
Oh God, there was one that I can't really remember now. It was what was it? It was something like, "We're mad." It had "Welcome to your first day" in the last part of it. I can't remember the first part of it, but I know the last line was "Welcome to your first day." And I just loved that one because it symbolized that. I think for me it was a starting point. You know, it was a starting point, and I even remember telling Matt, I really hope we can sustain this energy. It's going to be really hard. And I really hope that we do.
And I think it was very symbolic to have the march on that first day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome to, this is what it's going to be like for you.
Well, and not just for him, but part of my reason for wanting to go was not just to show him that he did not have my vote, and he did not speak for me, but to show the world that he did not speak for me, that he, as far as I'm concerned, his administration does not value the things that I value at all, and that I wanted the world to see that. I wanted to be, when people, and as a historian, I'm always thinking historically, which is part of why I'm here today. I wanted people to look back and know what side I was on. The Woody Guthrie song, "Which Side Are You On?" I wanted people to know which side I was on. I did not want there to be any doubt or any questions. One of the things that always frustrated me about when I was growing up is because, I was kind of in love with the 60s and the 70s. The hippie generation, like all the protests, and like I would learn about it, and I would just, God, I wish I was alive back then. God, I wish I was alive back then. God, it would have been so great to have been a part of that. And I would get so frustrated with my parents because they hadn't been a part of that. I was like, why not? And so when this happened, I knew I had to be there. I knew I had to be in this moment. I knew that I had to. It's one of those "where were you" days, like when my mom can remember where she was when Kennedy was shot, and I can remember where I was when the Challenger exploded and when 9/11 happened. I mean, I can remember it down to the minute, but I knew that this was gonna be one of those moments. I just didn't know how big, and there were so many people there. There were so many more than they were expecting, and I felt vindicated in a way and legitimized. Like, okay, it's not me. It's not just me. It's not just me and my small group of friends who is angry. There are a lot of people who are angry about the direction this country is going in. And so it was cathartic in a way. It was cathartic and healing in a sense.
Did you feel emotional at any point throughout the day?
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah. I got goosebumps when, like, Ashley Judd gave her poem. And then just seeing Gloria Steinem and Angela Davis, even from afar, even on the stage, like, you know, I had studied these women. You know, I'd read their books and I just, it gave me goosebumps to be part of the same movement as these women that I admired. When we started marching, when we finally started marching, it started off very slow because there were so many people. But then once we finally got going and finally got momentum, it just, like, the crowd and the energy. I was worried that because the speakers had gone so long that we would lose some of that momentum. And I had even mentioned that to my friend. But it turns out that, you know, people had kind of started marching on their own. And so by the time it dispersed a little, people actually started marching with the chants and the cheers and the signs, and people were stopping to hug each other and, you know, take pictures and, you know, and it just, there was, like, you could reach out and feel the energy in the city. It was one of the most intense experiences of my life, and easily one of the best experience. Like, just, if I had to rank my life experiences, that would be up there, most definitely, because DC itself is such a historic city that every time you go, you feel like you're walking in the footsteps of giants. But to participate in something on that level in that city, which is part of why I wanted to go, but just to know that you were standing in the same place as Martin Luther King and the suffragists and the civil rights movement and the anti-war protesters and the women's movement, just to know that you were in the same space, occupying it for a similar purpose, it's pretty exhilarating. There were a couple of times where I think I cried just because it was so overwhelming. Just the emotion and the feeling that I was there. Definitely when we got to the White House, when we marched, because we started out near the castle. That's where we were, and then we just walked down. I think it was Pennsylvania? No, I can't remember, but we walked down that side street and then turned right in front of the Washington Monument. And I remember looking left, seeing the monument, looking right, seeing Congress, and then looking ahead and seeing the White House. And that's really kind of where I had an emotional moment. Yeah, it was pretty. I can't really describe it.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
We keep saying that word, amazing.
It's because there's no other word that does it justice. I mean, I can't think of one. Exhilarating.
All these big words.
Yeah. I mean, you can throw them all out there, but I think again, if you weren't there, the energy, there was a palpable energy. It felt transformative. Like
that's a great word.
We were going to change and we were going to be the checks and balances that made sure this country did not go backward.
So did you your mother was concerned.
Yeah.
At any time, did you ever feel unsafe? And how did you feel about the presence of police officers? What was your interaction with them?
I never felt unsafe. I was aware, situationally aware, but I didn't feel unsafe. And the DC police were amazing. I think part of it is they're used to handling big crowds, so they know. But I think the other part of it is that they recognized that we were there for an important purpose. So you had you had protesters going up to the police officers saying, "Thanks for keeping us safe, man," or "Thanks for what you do." And I know I went up a couple of times to some and said, "We really appreciate, what y'all are doing," because I think right now, especially in light of all the things that have happened, the police have have kind of a bad rep. I would say the vast majority of police officers in this country are just good people who want to help their communities. I think you have a 10% small percentage of people who get in law enforcement for reasons that they shouldn't be in law enforcement and use that as a power boost. And unfortunately, and I can say this as a teacher as well, unfortunately, it only takes a few to ruin it for the vast majority. That's been my experience in education, and I feel safe in making the same assumption about law enforcement. But the DC police were so kind and really helpful, and they did their job, but they weren't aggressive. They weren't. If there was some place that we couldn't go, they were like, "You can't go that way, ma'am. We need you to stay." And people for the most part, did what we're told. When the DC police realized that there were more people than they had anticipated, I think there was some concern that they were going to hold firm to those lines. And then the DC police just started opening up the National Mall, and saying, "Get on the sidewalk, get on, walk on the grass, whatever you need to do." And I think they realized that, at this point, all they could really do was crowd control, but they were exceptionally kind and really willing to help. I saw several police officers helping some older women who had just given out and, was trying to help it, and they were giving them rides and, assisting and, they were just, they did a good job. In fact, when we were walking back from the White House, I saw several police officers, and I just said, "Thank you for, making sure that we were all safe today." And he said, "We're just doing our job, ma'am." It's kind of like a very, very Mr. Chips kind of response, but it was nice. I don't think they get nearly the props that they deserve, especially in that city.
And it must have been, I think, nobody expected the size of the crowd. I think the fact that it was a very peaceful crowd,
yes,
anyway, kind of made their lives probably a little, the decision making was easier because we were not going to be a mob.
Well, and not only that, I think they didn't overreact because the crowd was so big. I think, had we been in a less experienced city where the crowd that wasn't used to handling the crowds, it might have gone a different way. But the fact that it was DC and that they, DC and New York and Boston, they're used to having massive crowds of people. So for them, a couple extra 100,000, it's a stretch, but it's not impossible. So for them, I think that that contributed to the fact that they were so, willing to kind of back off. And we were a peaceful march. And I think that says a lot about the people who were there, that many people can congregate in one area and there not be rioting and looting and issues of violence. We weren't there to be violent. We were there to let our government know that we're not going to stand by and let you take us backwards. We're not going to go back to the days where gay people have to hide in closets and Black people have to fear for their lives, and women are not allowed to have basic fundamental human rights.
Did you this is a practical sort of question. Did you and Matt have a plan for keeping together? Because there's a big crowd.
Yeah.
Did you have a strategy for what happens if you separate? Or
Yeah, we had decided once we figured out where we were in relation to everything, that if we were to get separated, we would meet at the Washington Monument because it was the tallest thing in the area. It was the one monument he knew, and it would be easy to find relative to where we were. So we had already decided that is where we would meet up, and we had each other's cell phones. Of course, the towers were. So that's why we had decided, hey, if we get separated, if this turns into chaos and madness, let's just meet at the Washington Monument. That's that big building over there. But we never got separated. It was, the crowd was not an aggressive crowd, so it was very easy to kind of navigate your way. We had people there. There were people there with strollers, people there with wheelchairs, people there with, I saw one woman with her crutches. And now that's some serious dedication when you go to a march and you're on crutches. And so, but the crowd was very accommodating. People understood that this was not a free-for-all. And then there were even some people who I think showed up expecting it to be, kind of a joke, but turned out to be, pretty into it. Like, there were a group of guys, I think they were fraternity guys, who were standing next to me, and, with me and my very vocal shouting and chanting and yelling. And, by the end of the speakers, they were shouting and chanting and yelling with me. So I think that, I don't know what their motivation was in showing up, but the fact that, by the end of it, they had kind of, joined in speaks to kind of it was a contagious energy. Yeah.
Did you at any time see any anti counter protesters?
I think I saw one, and people just walked right by him. I kind of felt sorry for the guy. Like, dude, you with your little sign, and you're surrounded by women, really. And I think after a while, he gave up and went home because I only caught a small glimpse of him, and then that was it. But beyond that, I didn't really see. I saw some people there with, John 3:16 signs, and the world is the apocalypse is nigh, the world is coming to an end signs. But you're gonna have those every day. So, and we just said, hey man, what's happening? And he said, the end of the world. And I said, well, yeah, that's why we're here. That's exactly why we're here. And so, but it wasn't, there were I didn't witness any negative interactions. I'm sure in a crowd that big, there might have been one or two, but for me, ultimately, it was such a positive experience. I would go back and do it all over again.
A very practical question. Did you prep, with your clothing, with your food, with your water? Did you come all prepared?
I did.
Tell me about how your preparation.
Yes. So I had my yak pack, which is my messenger bag. But they said that we couldn't bring those. So I had purchased a little hipster bag. Actually, my mom gave it to me as a March gift. She said, this is my contribution to your activism. So she bought me a little Vera Bradley purple hipster bag. So fancy. And I had it blinged out with all of my buttons. And I took the bare, identification, credit card, bare necessities. And then in terms of what to wear, I knew that I didn't want to wear jeans because jeans would chafe, be walking around all day. So I wore yoga pants. I wore yoga pants. I wore my my good walking running shoes. And I took a couple pairs of socks to change out because I knew it was going to be that kind of day. And then I had on a long sleeve shirt, and then my winter coat, and then I had my scarf, and then I had my hat. And my scarf was pink, and my hat was pink. So, and then I had buttons everywhere. So in terms of that, yeah. And I packed some energy bars because I didn't know when we were going to eat. And it was actually kind of funny. At one point when we were marching, I could tell that Matt was getting a little grumpy. And I was like, do you need to eat? Is it time to eat? I can get and he said, I think I might need some food. And the woman standing next to us said, here, I have food. And she opened up her bag, and there were like chips and granola bars and chocolate chip cookies and bottled water. I mean, she had an army of stuff. And Matt was like, I thought you came prepared. This woman is on top of it. I mean, just this strange woman with supplies willing to give us stuff. And so, you know, that was kind of a fun moment that, you know, but that's the energy of the crowd is everybody, you know, it felt like we were all in this together. So, you know, but that was kind of a humorous moment at the time. And then that was the last time we ate until I think like 10 o'clock at night.
Before we go, I want to talk about going home and stuff, but before we do that, can you compare what your thoughts, what your expectations going to the march, how they compare to your experiences at the march?
The only thing that I knew about marching in public protest was what I had studied and read about, because social activism is kind of my thing. I knew it could get violent, and I was a little worried about that. Not from us, you know, but from people responding to us. I was a little concerned about the police just because of, you know, the previous day on Inauguration Day, they had, I think, anarchists had gone into the city and destroyed property and blown stuff up and or set fire to things. And so there's a little bit of concern about that. My mom told me, if you get arrested, I'm not coming after you. And my dad then called me and said, I'll come after you. But don't get arrested. So I was a little nervous because I didn't really know what to expect. There was a lot more standing around than I had imagined. You know, there were a lot of speakers. But the whole experience was, it lived up to my expectation, it lived up to what I wanted it to be. You know, I wanted it to be positive. I wanted it to be uplifting. It was very exhausting. I will say that. In fact, at one point, I was so tired I had to sit down, and because we've been on our feet for like hours. And Matt looked at me and he said, "Being an activist is hard." I was like, "Yes, it is." I said, "Can we just go and sit somewhere for a minute?" And I think a lot of people don't think about those things. You know, they don't think about the physical strain of being an activist. You know, so so that was kind of a fun moment. And we once we got to the White House, I left my sign right in front of the White House. We took a bunch of pictures. And then we started walking back to the stadium because I looked at the map and I was like, well, it's not that far from the White House to the stadium. We can manage. And it was about 8 miles from the White House to the stadium.
Did you walk the whole
We walked the whole 8 miles. We walked right. We didn't think it was going to be that bad, and there were other people walking with us who walked the whole 8 miles, and we were originally going to walk to Union Station and then try and catch a train, but the police told us, good luck getting a train, because it was so overcrowded, and the one thing that we were adamantly afraid of was missing the bus. That was the one thing that we did not want to happen. So I told Matt, I said, let's just hike it. And he said, I'm game if you are. And it was 8 miles uphill. And we walked the entire 8 miles. We walked past Capitol Hill. We walked past the Belmont Paul National Women's Party headquarters. This is a testament to how tired I was and how sore my feet were. Matt was like, "Oh, look there! Don't you want to stop?" No, let's keep going. Let's keep going, because if I stop, I won't get up. We did have to take some breaks. We walked through I think it was Washington Heights, through like where Mary McLeod Bethune lived, and through the historic with all the places with all the brownstones and stuff out near the stadium. And so, we just walked the whole...
How long did that take?
It took 2 hours.
Man.
And we made it to the bus right on time. We were like some of the first people there, but literally my feet were so swollen I couldn't get my shoes off when we got on the bus. I couldn't get my shoes off because my feet were so swollen from all of that walking. And I'm a walker, I love to walk. I mean, if I can walk all the time, but after marching all day and standing, and then it was, I knew it was going to be a lot of walking, but that was a lot. 8 miles after all of the marching. But it was part of the experience, and I got to see parts of DC I'd never seen before, so that was kind of cool. And then we got to the bus. We had to find our bus at the stadium, which was crazy ridiculous because we didn't know where our bus was going to be parked, because remember, our bus had dropped us off. So, I mean, there were a sea of buses, and we're just like, oh my God, which one is us? So we had to wait for the person who had organized it. We had to wait for her in order to find out which bus we were going to be on. So, but then when we finally got on the bus, it felt so good to sit down. And then I looked at Matt and I said, "You're right. Being an activist is hard." And so we started our trip back.
What was the mood like on the bus on the way home?
People were quiet. I think people were processing. I was posting pictures, but I think people were processing, and the bus driver didn't want to stop. He wanted to get us right back to Atlanta, and he realized he was going to have a mutiny on his hands if he didn't stop, because people were hungry and they were tired and they had to pee. So we stopped at a Golden Corral, which is never first on my list of places to eat, but it tasted so good that night. And I think I went back to that buffet 3 different times because I had not eaten all day long. And so with the one exception of the snack in the middle of the day that the woman had so graciously given us. So it was nice to be able to sit down and have a meal, and then we got back to Atlanta. I think I want to say like 2:00 in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was pretty early.
Yeah, or maybe it was 4. I don't remember, honestly. But we got back. I mean, they made good time getting back to Atlanta. And then we went back to my house, took an Uber to my house, and just completely collapsed.
Talk about, well, so you woke up the next day, like, late?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about how you were feeling and what you did the next day.
I think we slept until 2.
Okay.
And then we went up to Waffle House, had breakfast. And a bunch of us who went were all texting each other. Where were you? What'd you see? Who'd you see? Just that kind of stuff. We were all commenting on each other's pictures on Facebook and stuff like that. So it was a very low-key day. And then I went back to work the next day, and I wore my Women's March shirt. And, of course, the kids wanted to know everything. So I had to show them my pictures and tell them about the whole experience. And, and then a couple of my kids went to the march in Atlanta, got their parents to take them. So that was pretty cool. So I was glad. They were like, Miss Grace, you inspire me so much. And that made me feel good to know.
Did you watch any of the coverage once you got back? Did you watch anything on TV about the march? And how did you feel about the way it was covered in the media?
I didn't really pay attention to how it was covered, other than I don't watch TV anymore. Not news TV. I haven't since way before the election. But I read articles, and so I liked the way some of the articles, like the New York Times, and just how I liked that they recognized that it was this monumentous march. I was not surprised at all when Trump came out and said that he was unimpressed, nor was I surprised when a group of conservative women came out and said that, we were not marching for them. And I was like, okay, well, you think about that the next time you vote, the next time you have custody of your child, the next time you can have a job, the next time you can have all of these rights that you take for granted. You think about that, because I may not agree with you, but I was marching for you. I may not agree with you, but I'm marching for your ability to have those choices. And I think that's the thing that people don't really understand about feminism. You don't have to agree with me. It's not about you, choosing my side. It's about you allowing women to have a choice in the first place.
So, since all of this has happened, there's been, we're kind of a ways away from it. How are you feeling now? How are you feeling about everything that happened since then?
I'm very proud of what I did going, and I'm very proud of my activism. It's been a little difficult for me since coming back for a couple of reasons. One, because I think I felt so energized and so mobilized, and so for like the first couple of weeks back, I was calling my senators and reps every day, reading everything online, mobilizing all of this, support of all these issues, and I was getting so worked up about every issue, and I found myself kind of crossing some of those lines that I had set for myself. about, you can believe this, other people can believe this, find a middle ground. Things were starting to become very black and white for me, because I felt so energized and so mobilized, and so I started to burn out. I burned out. I really did. I'm still burned out in a way, not because of the march, but just because of the fact that I tried to carry that energy for the next 2 months, and I couldn't do it. And then there's a little bit of guilt that I can't be a full-time activist, because I know people who can. I have friends I have a friend, she goes to every march, every rally, every protest, every town hall meeting, and I'm an introvert by nature, so getting me to go to that march was a big deal for me. I can't be on all the time like that, and it was information overload, because I was reading about all of the things that his administration is doing, and I was getting so angry and so outraged, and then I'd get angry that other people weren't getting angry and outraged, and I just couldn't continue to carry that activism. So I'm trying to find a balance right now. It's been a little hard, because I feel like on one hand that I should be the person out there doing everything. But then on the other hand, I realize that I have a full-time job. I have a part-time job. I'm in grad school. I can't carry it all. I think that's been the hardest part of this for me, is that knowing that I can't care about every issue. I mean, I can be interested in every issue, but I can't care about every issue. And so right now, I think what I'm really trying to do is figure out what 3 issues are the most important to me that I really want to devote my time to, because there's so many to choose from, and there's so much to be angry about right now, and so much to be outraged about, that I just can't afford mentally to be outraged all the time every day. Because I would get up in the morning and look at the news or read the news, and I would just start my day. Before I even rolled out of the bed, I would be furious at the way that things are going in our country and with this administration. And I just, my health was starting to be affected by it, So I'm really trying to find that balance right now of what issues. I know definitely reproductive rights. Women's history, I think, is a big one for me, obviously. Women's history, women's education in general. So I'm just trying to figure out that third, the 3 that will really occupy my time, and just direct my attention towards those 3, because I just can't give all to all. There was a lot of there was a lot of push after the march to get as politically active as you can, as quickly as you can, involved in as much as you can. And while I agree with that, I think it's also important to understand that as one person, I can have an impact, I can have a difference, I can make a difference. I can't do it all, I can only focus on one issue at a time, and that's okay. I think some of the best activists in the history of activism have been that way. Alice Paul was adamantly about the vote. That was it. She didn't care about birth control. She didn't care about anything else. She cared about the vote, and she devoted her life to it. Susan B. Anthony was the same way. Frederick Douglass was, adamant about civil rights, period. And so I think when one person is passionate about one topic, they can do amazing things. But I think when you start trying to tackle everything is when you spread yourself too thin.
I agree. When you got back from the march and sort of since then, how have your parents been? Did you talk to them about the march or?
When I got back, my mom and dad said, "Well, we're glad you had fun." And I thought, I don't know, I did have fun, but I don't necessarily think that's the word. You know, I did have fun. I had an amazing time. Amazing, yeah. I had a great time. But more importantly, it created it renewed something in me. But I don't necessarily expect them to see that or understand that. I did tell my dad, I said, "I know you don't understand why I did this." And I said, but I hope you'll respect the fact that I did it. And he said, "I always respect your choices, because at the end of the day, they're your choices, even if I don't agree with them." So we have currently in my family an agree to disagree. My mom still tries to talk to me about politics, and I finally just am like, no, okay, I'm going to hang up now. I love you. I'm going to hang up now, or Mom, change the subject, but I think even she has started to realize that there's no way that can, because we just see so drastically different on things.
Because it sounds like most of your friends are progressive as well.
Yeah.
When you said you're sort of checking in with everyone when you got back.
Yeah.
Did you have anybody who was like, what were you thinking about?
No, most of my friends when we got back were just like me.
Yeah.
The one friend that I had, that actually happened about a month later, so end of February, early March, was the friend who went with me to the march, my friend Matt. He, at the time, he was living with me, and we got into a big argument one morning about abortion, of all things. I was telling him a story about someone I knew who had had an abortion, and that I was frustrated with other people's lack of compassion for her. And we got into this big, huge fight about abortion, and he accused me of being closed-minded towards people who didn't think like me. And it kind of all came out of the blue, so I'm just like, where's this coming from? And so that night, he moved out of my house, and when he moved out, one of the things that he told me was that I had become too intense and was too political, and that I was too quick to tell everybody that I was a feminist, and that my whole life was women's rights, women's history, women's suffrage, women's this, women's that, and that he just couldn't take it anymore. And that he couldn't be friends with me like this, that it was too much for him, that I was very angry and very bitter.
It's going to be a hard few years for him ahead with all these angry women.
From my best friend,
yeah.
The man who went with me to the march. And so I share this not to talk poorly about him, because I'm sure he had his reasons for saying what he did, and we are no longer friends, and we don't speak anymore. But for a lot of reasons, because there were other things he said that were very personal that I won't get into. But the focal point of it was that I was very one-sided, or I had become very one-sided. And to me, I had always, I'm a woman. Women's history, women's suffrage is what I'm studying. Women's history is my passion. You went with me to this march. I am a feminist, and I don't understand women who aren't. I don't even understand men who aren't, but I can understand it a little more. So for me, him saying that at that time when I was already feeling kind of like confused about my role as an activist, and was just kind of the icing on the cake. And so, that was kind of a hard thing. And I share this again, not to talk poorly about him, because he's not a bad person, but because I think it's important that whoever hears this down the line, or reads about it, or studies about it, understands that a lot of people, that this election has cost people a lot, not just in terms of political parties, but has cost people friendships, has cost people families. I know people who don't talk to their families anymore because of politics. Who don't talk to them at all because of this election. Because for those of us on the left, Trump represents racism and bigotry and sexism and discrimination and hate and everything that we don't want to be part of our country. And his administration reflects that, I think, in the actions that they've taken since then, with some of the things that they've done. And so it's not just about voting for a Republican anymore. It's about voting for the set of ideals that we don't want to be reflective of our country. And so I think a lot of women especially have lost friendships, have lost marriages, have lost relationships, families, because this election has this presidency and the march has drawn some fine lines for people, and some lines in the sand. Like for me, I am proud of my participation in the march, and I will continue to march, and I will continue to donate money, and I will continue to be an activist in ways that I can, and I will continue to be outspoken. I can't do it all. I can't go to everything. I can't be everywhere, but I'm going to find those issues that matter the most to me, and I'm not going to let anyone shame me for caring about, but I think, and I don't think that's what he was intending, but I do think that it shows the divide that America is very polarized right now. And I think that the fact that friendships that are really good friendships have been lost over politics right now shows how divided people are.
You mentioned other marches. Are you planning to go? There's 2 or 3 marches going on in April. Are you planning to go to any of them?
I'm doing the March for Science in Atlanta. And I wanted to do the tax march, but I can't take off work. Okay. But I am going to do the March for Science because I think one of my big issues is the environment. In fact, I'm seriously thinking that that's going to be my 3rd issue. It's because the environment, like to me, if we don't have clean air and clean water, nothing else matters. So for me, just the Science March is kind of a part of that. But I'm going to stay local and do that one because, and then this summer, there's the Equality March in D.C. I may go to D.C. for that one. I may stay local. It just depends. but but things like that. I donate money to like Planned Parenthood and the ACLU and NPR, and then the Trevor Project, which is for LGBT youth, because being a teacher, I see so much of that. And then RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. So so even though I can't go to everything I want, I do give money to those charities that matter a lot to me. But yeah, I plan to do some other marches.
Like we're here. We are. It's April.
Hmm?
You've got some time ahead for this administration to sort of their activities to play out. What do you hope will happen?
I am hopeful that the Democrats will take back the House and the Senate in the midterms, and that will pause. I think this, if anything, this election has caused people to recognize A, the importance of voting, and B, the importance of being vocal and active. I will still call my senators and my reps. I don't do it as often now, but if it's an issue, it's one of my issues, then I will call them. And so I'm hoping that it will cause people to vote. And I honestly, I really hope that, and I think it's starting to happen, that the conservative side of the Republican Party will implode. Because, I mean, I really feel like that's happening. O'Bannon just got knocked off the Security Council, which I was very happy about. They couldn't repeal Obamacare, which I was very happy about. And I'm sorry if you can't repeal a law you spent 10 years complaining about when you have the majority in the Senate and the House and the presidency. Something is wrong with your party, or something is wrong with your party's position. And I think that people are starting to, I think even Republicans, the moderates, are starting to kind of move away from him and his hard line. And I think, I really hope he gets frustrated with the fact that he can't get anything done like he wants to, and I really hope he quits. That would be the ideal situation. Of course, that would put Mike Pence in office, and he scares me too. But I also hope that the Democrats. My hope is also that the Democratic leadership can get their behinds together, that they can kind of mobilize and understand that their base is energized, and that they need to make sure that their base continues to be energized, because that's what's getting stuff done. You can there's no more compromise. They're not willing to compromise. You can't be willing to compromise. You've got to, I think the Republican leadership has shown that they have no ethics or morals when it comes to playing dirty.
So that's your hope. What do you fear the most?
Him getting reelected. 8 years of him, and then the Republican control of Congress. One of the first things I did after the election was reread Handmaid's Tale. It's one of my favorite books. And I remember the first time I read it and I was like, oh, this will never happen. Right after the election, reading it scared the crap out of me, because I could so easily see it happen. And so that's my fear, that slowly the right wing, who has aligned themselves with white supremacists and neo-fascists, will try to chip away. I also, another fear that I have, probably more realistically, is I have a fear that a war with Russia is coming. I do that. I fear that because, Putin, I don't think will take very much more of the United States talking about Russia's involvement. And he'll do something, and then, so that's a fear I have. War with Russia, and then we're back in a Cold War all over again. Or maybe not a Cold War. I think you've got two power-hungry people in office who care nothing about the people that it would harm. And that's my biggest fear.
What strategies do you think what would you suggest people do? We've got many months ahead of us dealing with all of this. What strategies for coping do you think are good strategies?
Well, considering I myself have burned out because I did not take the advice of a friend of mine who said find an issue and stick with it. I think that would be the first thing, is to find an issue, or two, and stick with it. Find the thing that you're most passionate about, and really devote your time and your energy to that, because you're not going to be able to do everything, and you're going to burn yourself out if you try. There's so many things to fix. There's so much to be angry about. And the good thing about it is I think so many people are angry and outraged that if each one of those people picks an issue, then that will solve the problems. But I think you have to save you have to get up every day and ask yourself, is this the hill I want to die on? Is this the mountain I want to climb? And I think you have to pick the topic that is most important. I think that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is, one thing that I've learned to do is, especially in this society where we're so connected all the time, is to learn to walk away from it. So I've disconnected a lot of my social media. I'm not on a lot of it anymore. I'm on Instagram constantly because I can take pictures. I love taking pictures. I try to stay off Facebook other than when my Instagram posts to Facebook, or if I see an article that is just really important to me. But I'm no longer trying to post every single thing that I see, because it becomes a news feed. And self-care, I think, is so important. We have to do things that provide for our mental well-being. I've started buying CDs again, which ironically, because for me, like, just the tangible feeling of opening that package and looking at the liner notes and feeling the CD in my hand is a magical experience. And so I've kind of reconnected with that, the experience of going to the record store and, and then just trying to make time for friends, staying away from the news. You're going to get it by osmosis anyway. I think if you watch the news all the time, you just become so... I have a friend who says information sick. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You become so information sick. And I've even seriously considered deleting Facebook. The only reason that I don't is because I have a lot of people that I would want to keep in touch with, and Facebook's really the only medium that will allow me to do that. So, yeah, I'm just trying not to post as much.
Well, we set up our interview.
We did on Facebook, yeah. And see, that's the thing, is that's why I haven't disconnected it all together, is like, I have a lot of old friends that people who live in other states that I'd want to keep in touch with, and not everybody's on Instagram, so, so I'll probably keep Facebook, but I just won't be as, I'll save my vocalness for the things that really matter, rather than try to tackle everything. I'm kind of an all or nothing person. which is not a good thing in an activist at all. It's a really good thing in a historian because you're so focused. It's not a good thing in an activist because you're like, this outrages me and I want to do this and this and this and this, and pretty soon, oh my God, the world's imploding.
Well, part of that is you are used to looking at cause and effect and big picture, you know, like context and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And it's very hard to sort of...
Yeah, all these little details are just too much for me. So I have to kind of focus, like I said, one or two things.
Speaking of the historian in you, how do you see do you see value in us documenting all of these activities, and how do you see that being valuable?
When I saw that archives and museums were starting to collect memorabilia and stuff, I was like, wow, that's really cool. That's really cool. And then when I saw that you were doing it, I had experience with this archive with using it because I did a lot of my research for my master's here, and of course you were wonderful, and I knew you, so I knew that I wanted my story to be here because Georgia State in a lot of ways has contributed to me being who I am on so many levels. I mean, I went here for my bachelor's, my master's, and I'm here for my doctorate. But I mean, I grew up here. This is my home, you know. So I knew that when I saw the call went out for stories, I knew that this is where I wanted my story to be, because I think it is important that we collect people's stories and their memories. I think especially for women, oral history is important because just the act of telling the story is so powerful and is a form of political agency that it really speaks to me. And so I wanted definitely, I knew I didn't have a lot of physical artifacts, but I knew I definitely had my story, and I wanted to share that.
And the fact that it's here forever means that people will always know what side you were on.
Yeah.
It's very clear, you know.
Yeah.
If it's in the archives, there's no pretending you were ever on another side.
No, I wanted them to know, and the historian in me likes the idea that 100, maybe 200 years from now, somebody will be sitting in maybe this room, maybe another room, listening to my interview and, you know, wondering what was she like, what was her life like, what was her experience like, what is she not telling me, who is this friend of hers, where is his story, you know, sorry, you'll have to figure that out. What was it like to see all the things, because there's no, having experienced a historic moment and then in telling about it, even in my head, I'm rattling through all the visual snapshots thinking of, well, I didn't mention this, you know, and it's just because there was so much. And now as a historian, I'm thinking of the people that I'm researching, and I'm like, well, what did they see that they didn't write about? So it's helping me kind of see it from another angle too. So I knew it would be a good exercise for me to share my story. I think it will help make me a better historian in the long run.
Cool.
And it's just cool.
If anyone's thinking about going to a march, either in DC or locally in the future, what's your piece of advice?
Do it. Do it. Yes. Do it. I think you have to be prepared for the low you're going to hit afterward, because you're going to be on such a high, and then you're going to get back and you're going to get so frustrated because you see all these new things and you feel like you're not doing enough, and you feel like it's never going to be enough, and you feel like, I think you have to see the march for what it is. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity that will politically invigorate you. but then you got to find a way that's doable to put the activism in your life, because while we respect them and admire them, not everybody can be Gloria Steinem. Not everybody can be Angela Davis, Alice Paul. Not everybody can devote their entire life to the cause or the movement. So I think what you have to do is you have to integrate it piece by piece in ways that are comfortable to you, and figure out, how am I going to fit this new part of me in? Or in my case, this renewed part, because like I said, I had been apolitical for so long that I was just like, to heck with it. And so the march kind of changed that. This election changed that for me. So I think that, I hope that, well, first of all, I hope the people who will listen to my story can work past all the rambling and understand it. But then I also hope that it will contribute to a broader understanding of the march. I mean, I'm just one person who took place in it, but I think that my experience was a lot of women's experience.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've asked you quite a few questions. Is there anything that I haven't asked you, or is there anything else you want to say before we finish?
I think the biggest thing now is where I go from here. Trying to figure out what's next and where I fit in to it. I think coming here today has helped me kind of process some of that so that I can go forward. I know that the march transformed me in some way. Usually, when we're studying history, we look at a person's experience at a particular event and how that event transformed them. So like the Anti-Slavery Convention in 1840 transformed Stanton from an abolitionist to a women's rights advocate. I think sometimes it's easy to overlook those moments. She went to a convention. Having experienced a transformative moment like that in myself, it helps me kind of place into perspective what the people in the past have done. So my hope is to, in some ways, I really hope that my research and my scholarship will be a form of activism for me. In fact, the more I really think about it, the more I'm kind of convinced that's that part of what I'm supposed to be doing, that, activism through education. So I'm hopeful that I will find kind of where I go. It's still early and we have a lot of work to do. So I'm hopeful that I will find my place.
I'm sure you will.
So
thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
It was great.